Hello 99ers, nerds, and 80s microcomputer fans. Pixel Pedant here once again, this time to try and tackle one of the biggest stories in TI gaming history, Tunnels of Doom. There's just no other game for the TI-99 that made as big a mark on the platform as TOD did. Not even Parsec. And don't get me wrong, Parsec is a great game. But Parsec is only one game. And by the end of the 80s, TOD had turned into an entire genre. But I'm not going to talk about that just yet. Believe me, we'll get there. As far as the Tunnels of Doom we got in 1982, it was always going to be an important game. It was the only real TI-99 RPG in the platform's heyday, at a time when the world was hungry for games that brought Dungeons and Dragons to the home computer. So, the community's response was unsurprisingly positive. 99er magazine said, "Tunnels of Doom belongs on every armchair adventurer's game shelf. The combinations and permutations in the two included games are virtually endless." The Pittsburgh user group said, "The variety in this game is incredible. There are up to 10 floors, 3 levels of difficulty, 4 types of character, 30 types of weapons, and 50 monsters and magic items." The Upstate user group said, "Tunnels of Doom is not a game like the Attack or Hunt the Wumpus that you'll get bored of or master quickly. On the contrary, it's a game of nearly endless variations that defies boredom." So the game was an instant hit. Though one of the very first reports on the game was, funnily enough, actually the most negative out of the whole lot. And that was from the International User Group's Summer CES 1982 report. That first look Tunnels of Doom preview had this to say: "Least impressive of all the new software we saw was the new role-playing adventure game entitled Tunnels of Doom. Utilizing GPL programming, Tunnels of Doom left this observer somewhat flat. Although TI suggests that the player is not just a spectator but an active member of a party entering dark, mysterious depths, Tunnels of Doom is certainly not one of TI's best game packages, when put up against Munchman, TI Invaders, or Car Wars." So maybe not everyone was excited by the prospect of taking Dungeons & Dragons gameplay home. Or perhaps some just weren't convinced this was going to be the game to do it. But more likely this was just a matter of TOD being a game that you're not going to get a good understanding of just by looking at it. And folks who actually played it mostly thought it was great. Tunnels of Doom gave the TI-99 a dungeon adventure with enough replayability to last you a while. And even more than that, it gave us a foundation we could build on to create new adventures someday. At least once we figured out how. But even on its own, Tunnels of Doom is a pretty impressive offering for 1982. Naturally, that starts with all the RPG essentials. You create a party of 1 to 4 players. You outfit your party for battle. You explore dungeons and fight monsters and find items to help you along your quest. But beyond those basics, the game has some pretty nifty tricks up its sleeve. One nice feature you run into right away is the option to pick a hero class if you want to play solo. Heroes have all the abilities of the other classes combined, so if you like the idea of a solo campaign, that option makes it viable. Always better to give players more options. But an even bigger quality of life feature is the game's auto map, which is definitely not an expected option in 1982. You still might want to keep a map on paper if you're a stickler for tradition, but if you need to check where you've been and where you haven't on the current floor, and want an idea where to look next, well, the auto map's got your back. And that exploration and discovery of the map is going to be a part of the challenge every single game, since, just like those community reviews said earlier on, Tunnels of Doom procedurally generates a dungeon of however many floors when you start your game. So, even playing the same quest, you're exploring a new dungeon every single time. And while that exploration is done in the dungeon's hallways, the battles play out inside another key feature of the game, its tactical battle map, where things like speed and range and position actually matter. So there's a whole lot more to fights than just picking an attack option out of a menu, and battles feel like more than just dice rolling. But once we're talking about enemies and such, we're talking about the game's content, and the biggest feature of Tunnels of Doom that did the most to give it its longevity is the way the game's content and the game's engine are separate data and separate media. If you buy Tunnels of Doom, you'll be getting the Tunnels of Doom cartridge with the game engine, but you'll also be getting either a cassette or a disc, as the case may be, with the adventures that you'll need if you want to actually, well, play anything. In box, your cassette or your disc is going to have 2 adventures on offer. One of them is called Pennies and Prizes, and this is really just a simple scavenger hunt quest. It's a kid's game with no scary monsters anywhere, where you can just explore the dungeon finding items. Might be useful as a tutorial level if you wanted to treat it like that. But what most people think of when they think of Tunnels of Doom is the other adventure, Quest of the King. This one's a proper dungeon crawl where you go into a dungeon beneath a ruined castle to rescue a king and his orb of power. The game and the adventures were created by Kevin Kenny at TI. Kenny was at this point a programmer who'd already made his mark on the system by writing the TI version of Hunt the Wumpus. But Harry Mishkoff, working at TI as well at the time, also put his mark on the game in a memorable way. He composed and coded the game's music. So Kenny and Mishkoff gave us the Tunnels of Doom cartridge and the adventure most people remember it by, Quest of the King. And if that was all we got from Tunnels of Doom, I'm sure it'd still be well remembered. But, happily, we got a whole lot more besides. Naturally, with an engine like this one, where a new adventure is just a cassette tape away, everybody's going to be looking for a new Tunnels of Doom adventure pretty soon, once they get their feet wet in Quest of the King. Especially given the game only really comes with that one adventure. Well, in an interview years later, Kevin Kenny did say TI had him work on more adventures, and he'd even finished one of them. But no such adventures ever came to TI customers. With TI's pullout from the home computer market, Tunnels of Doom fans were left to fend for themselves. In the summer of '85, one author writing for the Times newsletter out of the UK had an anecdote to offer that summed up the issue. A while back, I wrote to TI to see if they could offer any assistance in writing new adventures for the Tunnels of Doom module. I actually received a reply from Dallas. Dale Osborne, manager of Home Computer Phaseout, replied, "The Home Computer division of TI's Consumer Products Group is no longer an entity, and consequently, there are no available resources to locate individual cartridge program database formats." So, help was not on offer, when it comes to cracking Tunnels of Doom in its adventure format at least. But 99ers are an industrious bunch, and so, that same summer of '85, we did see a new hero rise, to take on the task of creating both new Tunnels of Doom adventures, and new tools we could use to make more of them. That hero was John Behnke, librarian of the Chicago TI Users Group. Behnke'd written plenty of basic games before, but his groundbreaking Tunnels of Doom adventure that changed the complexion of that cartridge forever was Tomb of Death. In Tomb of Death, you descend into a haunted tomb and defeat the evil Demi-Lich, who lurks within an old evil tomb. A tomb within a tomb? Anyway, on the way you run into enemies like Umber Hulks, Night Hags, Frost Giants, and Pit Fiends, and most of the adventure's going to be pretty familiar to most people who've played Quest of the King, but, well, this was still a breakthrough. And in his second adventure, he does even better. That's Assault the City, where 8 travelers have been taken captive by the inhabitants of an underground city, and you must rescue them. Classes are the Warrior, Enchanter, Wizard, and Champion. And the adventure comes with a basic program containing a longer and better backstory than any pure Tunnels of Doom adventure could ever offer. Definitely a nice addition, and thoughtful. So that was all pretty exciting, and the word got out that new Tunnels of Doom games were now a thing. In June, Ottawa reported, 2 new games are now available to be used with this cartridge. In July, Saskatoon had fuller details on Tomb of Death and its cost and availability. and goes on to report the freeware release of Assault the City as well. By November, the news had made the rounds of the TI-99 newsletter sphere, and the world knew that Tunnels of Doom wasn't just a one-game module anymore. TOD was now the platform for building new adventures it always should have been. The news had made as far as Australia, where Sydney had this to say. What is Assault the City, you ask? It's another one of those really stupid arcade games. No, it's not one of those. Assault the City is a new game for Tunnels of Doom. Yes, that's right, there is actually a new game for Tunnels of Doom. The scenario is, the king has asked you and another party to find a path through the impassable mountains. Your group was delayed while it was getting supplies, so the other party did a credulous thing. They left without you, intending to meet you by the lost ruins of the great city of Grislod. When your group arrived, the other party was not there. After examining the area, you come to the conclusion that they were taken captive and are being held somewhere in the lost city. Your mission, should you decide to accept it, is to rescue them before they are killed. So, on the one hand, John Behnke's work was some fantastic news for the TI community. And Assault the City got into plenty of hands, plenty quick, the world over, thanks to its being released as freeware. But, on the other hand, the bad news is the freeware model didn't work out great for John Behnke in his telling of it. That fall, he had this to say in a newsletter question and answer on freeware distribution. About your question on freeware, I've marketed 2 games, one freeware and the other by direct sale, and I would like to see freeware work, but to be perfectly honest with you, I made 10 times as much with the non-freeware program. If you plan to distribute a program to make money, don't do it as freeware unless you have no choice. The freeware concept is a great idea, but unfortunately falls prey to the fact that most people will not pay for a program that they already have. About 15 people sent me $5 for one of my games, while with the other I received over 50. The freeware program was better. It is sad to think that people will not even send $5 for a good program. I'm now releasing programs either public domain or through Asgard software. So, fair enough. Asgard it is. And, well, freeware be damned. Because we're all a bunch of cheap bastards, apparently. The truth hurts. But the good news is there was a bright future for Tunnels of Doom games at Asgard, so that wasn't a destiny to be mourned. John Behnke sold his Tunnels of Doom editor through Asgard, and that program opened things up so that anyone could create a Tunnels of Doom game, without having to fire up a sector editor and fiddle with byte values and try to figure out what they did. Even better tools exist today, but Behnke's editor sure did get things rolling. That editor and what came after are a story for next time, I think. For now, we've gone all the way from Kevin Kenny creating Tunnels of Doom at TI and the first demonstration of the game at Summer CES 82, to derisive disapproval from the IUG, all the way to the summer of 85 when John Behnke blew the lid off the TOD adventure format and turned Tunnels of Doom into what it is today and what it should have always been, an RPG engine instead of a one-off adventure. Next time, I'm looking forward to taking us on a tour of the TOD adventure format and the editor. But even more so, I want to look at the 80s and early 90s era adventures they created. That should be coming up soon. Some of them, like Assault the City, do a great job of adding the right kind of flavor to the Tunnels of Doom format within its limitations. Others, like Daring Adventures in Kmart, go to town just being goofy and ridiculous. Thanks for watching, folks. What are your own memories of Tunnels of Doom? I'd like to hear them in the comments. Have you ever tried your hand at creating Tunnels of Doom games, for that matter? Or did you just stick to playing them? Lots to talk about, and more I'd like to talk about myself next time. This is Pixel Petant, leaving the dungeon for now.